Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Let's get to the G7. Oliver Crook is on location in Stresa in Italy. The EU Economy Commissioner Paolo Gentiloni is alongside him. Oliver, good morning.
That's right, Menace. Thank you very much. And we heard Bruno Le Maire talking about China and trade and sort of equal playing field. That's one of the big topics here. The other big topic will be how to get that financing for Ukraine's defense on stable footing for the years to come. I'm very pleased to be joined by Paolo Gentiloni to talk about some of the main themes and things we've been discussing here at the G7. So let's deal first with this, the Russian frozen assets, how to go about dealing with them. Are we close to a deal and a compromise on how to use those assets?
I would say we are working on this in a very good atmosphere. From our side, the EU side, as you know, a few days ago, we finalized our proposal to dedicate the windfall profits from the freeze assets, and we will start to disburse to Ukraine the first tranche of this decision now in July. Then here we are working to try to maximize this and to find the best way to do this as fast as possible. Again, using the windfall profits of the assets. I think having seen the discussion in the G7 in the last months, I think we are narrowing the differences and we are addressing mostly the details of these decisions. So I'm confident that in the coming weeks we can...
So you think we'll have an agreement by the G7 leaders meeting?
I think at least a political agreement before the leaders G7 is possible.
And I want to also get your take on sort of how China, what sort of space that occupies in the conversations here. We heard Janet Yellen speaking about it yesterday. We heard Bruno Le Maire today. Is the G7 unified on how to sort of address the question of Chinese overcapacity?
But for sure, the G7 needs to be unified. To have a unified approach in the EU view, we need to strengthen also our mutual exchange of information, our monitoring, because to have a common approach, we also need to share information on measures to be taken. And this is, I think, what everyone around the table of the G7 is agreeing. Of course, we are, especially us, the European Union economy, we are very interested in a balance. From one side, we have to face Chinese overcapacity and industrial expansion. From the other side, we don't want that this de-risking compromise the advantages of global trade, which are very important for the European Union. So how to find this balance is very important, but I see unity in the G7 table.
And you think that you can get concretely, because the problem is that the U.S. can move a little bit faster, it throws up trade barriers, and then a lot of that overcapacity comes over to Europe. So how do you deal with that problem as the European Economy Commissioner?
Well, of course, we are not in the condition to know if there is a redirection of Chinese to
it's happened,
Europe,
for example, in the solar industry.
Yeah. At the same time, the amount of electric vehicles that China is now exporting to the U.S. is not so huge to make us have a threat that these are diverted to Europe. So the problem is not the immediate impact of this decision, but it is the principle that to have a united approach, we need to share information in the decision that we take.
And debt is the other sort of elephant in the room. It's something that obviously you're thinking about within the European Union. You're beginning sort of your infringement proceedings. How do you expect that to go within the EU? How do you get debt under control within Europe?
Well, we are not the one with the highest level of debt in the room. As you know, in the EU we have 83% of debt. But of course we have our fiscal rules that are back there, renewed, reformed, and they will address the high level of debt in some countries without, I think, creating problems to growth. The positive note is that finally the European economy is moderately, slowly again in the growth path. This is very important.
But growing a lot slower than, for example, the United States, which is really causing some issues, particularly on the rate path divergence. What do you think the risk is to the European economy of the divergence between the Fed and the ECB?
Well, I think that the path of inflation decline could be different. I'm sure that the ECB will decide their monetary policy independently from what the Fed decide. At least I don't see any risk of a different orientation from the ECB in the short term. Then, as always, the ECB will decide on the basis of the data. But what the markets are expecting, I think it's realistic that in the coming months we will have a reorientation of monetary policy towards the declining of interest rates.
And a very quick question. There's been an election called in the United Kingdom. Could a different government, a government perhaps less hostile to the European Union, mean closer ties between Europe and the UK?
Well, closer ties are what we expect. I have to say that we reached a very good agreement with the existing government, but if closer relations are possible with a new government, we are very happy.
So some optimism from Paolo Gentiloni. He's the EU Commissioner on the Economy, joining us here at the G7 meeting of finance ministers in Stresa, Italy.